This tip didn't actually come in from one of the comments or email. This came from the students I've been working with. The problem they've been having with canvas that is sold to them that they used to be able to depend upon, but recently they've noticed problems with it. So I want to show you how to detect those problems while they're there and how to solve them. Where we've seen the problems happen most often are in the sheet canvases, those little pads you buy of maybe 12 sheets of cut canvas. Also, we've seen it appear in the roll canvas that I've been recommending all these years. Brands I recommend. What I discovered through research is that the companies we used to depend upon that always give us a really good quality canvas, too many of them are now sourcing out their canvases to China. Pardon me, our Chinese friends, but this is a fact. The quality's gone down. Now we're getting crappy canvas where we used to be able to depend upon a company to give us really good quality canvas. So I want to show you, first of all, suppose you buy a pad or a roll of canvas and then you find out your paint's just soaking into it. It's especially evident with oil painters, but even acrylic painters are experiencing that somewhat. Suppose your paint's just soaking into it, whereas before it used to glide more smoothly over the surface. It's improperly gessoed, and in many cases a cheaper weave of canvas is being used. So don't fear, there is something you can do about that. But I want to show you first of all how to test that. One thing, you should be sure you're painting on the right side. It's primed canvas. It says it's primed. Primed canvas. On one side it's going to be whiter, on the other side it's going to be slightly lighter, or beigeier, darker I should say. Usually as a kind of a neutral looking backside. If you're painting on the wrong side, that's not the company's fault, that's your fault. But if you are painting on the prime side of the canvas and the paint is soaking in, that's where the problem may be. So before you get to that stage, I have a little exercise I can show you can do to check out to see, do you need to go this extra step now to resurface the canvas so that it's going to work good for you. You can take a little, any size light, a flashlight, and sometimes you don't need a flashlight. If you have a bright light, you can hold the prime side of the canvas up to the light. I see it's not coming through in our studio light, but if you hold a flashlight to it like this, like that, can you see those little prickle pinholes in there? You can see in this one. Now this is canvas I've been depending upon for years and years and years, made by Fredericks, and I'm going to say the name out loud because they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Where I used to be able to depend upon this being really properly primed, now I'm seeing little pinholes in there. If it's the canvas that you got in the sheets, you may see more pinholes, and you'll see a wider weave. But then if you have a really good quality canvas, now this is a Winsor Newton stretched canvas. If you have a really good quality canvas and you can see the difference, if you get really close, you don't see any pinholes. And see, you can just move your light all around it just like this to check the front of that canvas to see, do you see any pinholes? You see any little bit of light coming through. If you see any light coming through, you need to reprime it, because that's, your oil is going to go right through that. It means that that's an open spot in the canvas. The oil's going to go right through there, and it's going to pull, and the pigment's going to sit on top, and so it's going to make it difficult for that oil for you to be able to move the oil around the canvas so that you can paint with ease. So I've shown you gessoing in previous videos, but I want to go through with what you can do. Now some of them say they're double primed, some say they're triple primed, and sometimes you can't depend upon that because the quality of gesso that's used to prime these canvases sometimes is not a good quality. So the gesso might be a lousy gesso, canvas might be a lousy canvas. If they're trying to get by cheap so they make more money off us, then that will happen. So one thing, when you buy gesso, buy acrylic gesso and buy the thick, some that's thick. Don't buy the thin gesso because we've discovered, is a poor quality. Now somebody may argue with me about that, I don't care. The Utrecht acrylic gesso is so far a really good, dependable brand. And if you get like I see right here, the Artist acrylic gesso, and here is the consistency of it. You see, it's relatively thick, and that is a really, really good quality gesso. So there's the first thing. Now, when you have a canvas that has pinholes in it, or is poorly gessoed like that, I'm going to show you a really sound method for gessoing it. Now I have shown gessoing canvases, I said before, in other tips, but I just want to show you a really sound method for gessoing. Now first, the really thick gesso does need to be thinned just a bit in order to go on without leaving brush strokes behind. You don't really want brush strokes to stay behind, but you can dip a spatula into water and you can thin that so that be sure when you thin it you mix the water into it thoroughly. But you don't need it wet, but it just needs to be thin, like a really good lotion, about the consistency of a really good lotion. So I'm just going to thin a little bit of that here, and be sure that it's thoroughly mixed. And let's see, I think I probably have that mixed enough. Now, I'll just pull that to the side. I'm going to set this to the side now so I can give myself more space to work in. And just lay this down. Alright, now this is a sheet of rolled canvas. And I just have it taped to the board. And I really had it taped and ready to do a demonstration, but that doesn't make any difference. Alright, here we go. I'm going to turn this and I'm going to show you how to do this. Just a brush that's not too stiff, not one of those, just an inexpensive brush from a hardware store, one of those China bristle brushes. It's really, really good. You can see what I've got there. You see those bristles on the end. They're not those really flat, tight bristles like you see the professional bristles that painters use for house painting. You don't want that. You want to have more flexibility. So those bristles that are pretty much shaped like this, you might find them at Walmart or the dollar store, or you might find them at the hardware store. They don't cost very much, $1, maybe two for $1, but whatever. Now, when you load the brush with gesso, load it on both sides like this, and when you stroke it in crisscross motion, like something like this. You see where, and hold the brush at an angle so that you'll pull that gesso into it. And when you first start putting it on, you put it on and keep stroking. The first stroke probably won't cover it thoroughly. Keep stroking until you're sure all that as much gesso as you can is worked into those into the surface of that canvas. Then, with paper towel, once you have the whole surface gessoed, you want it smooth. So with paper towel, pull off the excess gesso, hold it flatter and just let it set for about 2 or 3 minutes yeah, there we go, until it begins to sort of firm up, and then use this crisscross, or you can even use a crisscross diagonal motion. Pull it one way and then pull it another, and that takes most of those strokes out so that you'll have a relatively smooth surface, and then it will continue to level out as it dries. Once it dries, if you really want to be sure it's thoroughly sealed, and especially if you're planning, if what you're going to do on it is not just a study, but if what you're planning to do on the canvas is a painting, then you probably want to give it more than one coat. In that case, you get a very fine sandpaper and just give it a light sanding, and take the surface texture off it, and then wipe. You can come behind that with one of those little sweeper wipes, something that's dust free, to get that dust off, and give it a second coat. You may find that even because when the gesso, sometimes even the fibers of the canvas will kind of rise to the surface, and so if you run your fingertips across it just like this, very lightly, you can feel if it still feels kind of rough, and if it does, in that case, just before you start painting, a little going over with a very fine sandpaper, and then a lint-free duster of some sort to pull off that dust is going to make it smoother. And I take one further step always before I start onto a canvas, which gives it a little extra insurance. I have a mixture, and you've heard me talk about this before probably, a 50-50 poppy oil and Gamsol. Poppy oil is a white oil, and it's a slow drying oil, but it's a really, really good, stable oil. And of course, Gamsol is a really ultra refined mineral spirits. The Gamsol actually evaporates from that. But what I do is I take a pad that's I use those gauze pads you can find, those big 3-inch gauze pads. Here we go. Here's one. There we go. These gauze pads that you can get at the pharmacy, for $100 per box, and they're lint free, so they're really, really good for this. But if you just soak the gauze pad just a little bit with that mixture of Gamsol and linseed oil, poppy oil, and then you rub it into the surface before you get ready to paint. This is for oil painters. Rub it into the surface like that. And then, once you have it rubbed into the surface, come back with a lint-free paper towel. Give it a gentle wiping, because you don't want too much oil there. And then go over it with your fingertips, and if it comes out shiny on your fingertips and not wet, then you can start painting immediately, and your paint goes right on. It works fine. If you want to do that, and then if you wait 2 or 3 days before you start painting, that oil will simply add as an additional sealer onto your canvas, and is actually a really good buffer between the paint itself and the canvas. But in that case, to make the paint go on more smoothly, you'd want to give it just a second little pass of that poppy oil. So that's the scoop on really lousy canvases. And so just keep in mind that just because you depended upon a brand of canvas at any time, especially in the past 5 years, always double check to be sure it is of an acceptable quality before you start painting on it. Check it to see, does it need to be primed again before you start working on it. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com, where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new. And let's see, I think I probably have that mixed enough. Now,